Kaelen had been asleep, or at least as close to it as a man like him ever got when the knock came. Sharp, urgent, insistent. It rattled the thin wooden door of his adobe cabin, echoing across the jagged rocks and desert scrub outside. At first, he thought it a trick of the wind, but when it came again, slower this time, he froze. The night was quiet, broken only by the distant call of a coyote and the muted drum of a storm rolling in from the west. Peering through the small slit in the door, he saw her. A woman, drenched from the storm, kneeling in the mud, her dress torn and clinging to her frame. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terror so raw it made his chest tighten. Lightning split the sky behind her, illuminating her pale, blood-streaked face. "Please, save me," she said, voice trembling. "They will kill me if I stay another hour." Kaelen's hand instinctively went to the bow at his side. He had spent years alone, hunting, tracking, surviving in the lawless borderlands between town and desert. He had avoided townsfolk and their petty quarrels, their judgmental eyes, and their fear. His cabin had been a sanctuary, untouched by trouble, until now. He pushed the door open, letting the wind and rain seep inside. The firelight from the hearth flickered on her face, showing a faint scar along her jawline. She was not a young girl, she was 30, but in that moment she looked almost childlike in her fear. "Come in," he said, his voice low, measured. "Tell me everything, and quickly." She rose to her feet, shivering, teeth chattering despite the fire's warmth. Her name was Mariselle, and she had been traveling alone, trying to escape the town of Red Willow, where men with guns and grudges had made her life a nightmare. Every step she had taken had led her here, to Kaelen's cabin perched like a watchtower against the rocky cliffs. I didn't know where else to go," she whispered, her voice cracking. They want me dead. For what I know. For what I saw." She pulled a sleeve over her bruised arm, as though hiding it from view, though the jagged shadows in the firelight already revealed the dark purples and reds. Kaelen studied her closely. She was telling the truth, or, at least, the kind of truth that came with fear and desperation. Kaelen motioned to the fire. "Sit, warm yourself. I'll get you dry clothes." He stepped into the back room, returning with a spare blanket and a coarse wool shirt, both clean but worn from years of use. As he draped the blanket over her shoulders, she flinched not from cold, but from instinct. From a lifetime of learning that no one could be trusted, the storm outside grew louder, rain slashing against the walls like angry fingers. The desert smelled of wet earth and ozone, mingling with the acrid scent of wood smoke inside. Kaelen poured a cup of water from a clay jug, holding it to her lips. Her hand shook violently as she drank. "Tell me who's after you," Kaelen said, sitting across from her, his dark eyes piercing hers. He had been alone for years, but the fire in her gaze stirred something long dormant, an instinct to protect, to fight, to take action. He didn't know who she was or why she mattered, but one thing was clear. If he turned her away, she would die tonight. Mariselle swallowed hard, gripping the blanket tightly. "It's the Carroll gang. They work for a man named Dugan. He thinks I took something from him, but I didn't. I swear I didn't." Her voice cracked. "I just saw something I wasn't supposed to see." Kaelen's jaw tightened. Dugan's name was known even in the far reaches of the desert, a ruthless man, more cunning than most, with men who left no witnesses. By helping her, Kaelen was inviting that danger straight to his doorstep. Yet the thought of leaving her to face them made his stomach twist. Outside, a flash of lightning revealed the jagged cliffs and the shadowy ridges beyond. Somewhere out there, Carroll gang men might be searching. But inside, in the flickering firelight, Kaelen met Maricelle's gaze. She wasn't just a frightened woman. She was a survivor. And tonight, in the desert silence, Their fates had collided. Kaelen drew a deep breath, feeling the weight of choice pressing against him. "You're safe here, for now," he said finally. "But we'll need a plan. They won't give up easily, and if they find you—" His voice trailed off. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Mariselle nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. For the first time in hours, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she had a chance to survive the night. Outside, the storm raged on, and in the heart of the desert, an Apache warrior and a desperate woman prepared to face a danger neither had faced before. The storm outside showed no sign of relenting. Rain pelted the adobe roof like small stones, and wind shrieked through the gaps in the cabin's walls, rattling shutters and carrying the scent of wet earth and ozone. Kaelen moved quickly, gathering supplies he kept for emergencies: dried meat, a water skin, and a small satchel of medicinal herbs. Every motion was deliberate, a combination of muscle memory and survival instinct honed over decades in the desert. Mariselle watched him quietly, wrapped in the rough wool blanket he had given her, shivering not only from cold but from lingering fear. You've survived out here alone all this time?" she asked, her voice barely above the roar of the storm. Kaelen didn't answer immediately. He adjusted the bow strapped to his back and turned, letting the firelight illuminate his dark, intense eyes. "The desert teaches you things most townsfolk never understand," he said finally. Silence, observation, waiting, and knowing when to act. Mariselle nodded slowly, understanding that patience might be her only weapon right now. She had grown used to the chaos of Red Willow, where men like Dugan and his Caro gang thrived on violence and intimidation. But the desert, this strange, quiet expanse, offered her a different kind of threat: isolation, exposure, and a man who was a mystery in his own right. Kaelen knelt by a small wooden chest and pulled out several sharp knives, wrapping them in strips of leather. "They won't stop at the town," he muttered, more to himself than her. "If they find you, they'll come here, even if they have to chase you through the storm." Mariselle flinched at the thought. They won't let me live if they catch me. Not just because I escaped, because I saw something I shouldn't have." Her voice trembled. "Dugan, he's dangerous. Worse than anything I've ever known." Kaelen studied her carefully. Her fear was real, but so was her determination. She wasn't the type to surrender easily, and that mattered to him. "Tell me what you saw," he said, his tone gentle but commanding. Mariselle swallowed, shivering. "I worked in the town saloon. I overheard Dugan making arrangements, plans that could hurt a lot of people. And then," her voice caught, "I saw him take something from the mayor's office. Something that doesn't belong to him. I don't know what it was exactly, but he knows I saw it." Kaelen's jaw tightened. Dugan had crossed the law before, but if what Mariselle said was true, it wasn't just petty crime. It was something that could change the balance of power in the county. The thought made him frown. Protecting her now wasn't just about survival. It was about justice, something he had buried deep under years of solitude. Outside, lightning split the sky again, briefly illuminating the rugged cliffs and the desert beyond. Kaelen moved to the window and peered out, the shadows of jagged rocks and twisted desert shrubs dancing in the storm. Somewhere out there, the Caro gang might already be on the trail. He had to act fast. He returned to Mariselle and knelt beside her, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "You'll need to stay inside while I prepare," he said. "I'll set traps around the cabin's silent alarms. If they come, I'll know before they reach the door." Mariselle nodded, gripping the blanket tighter. I trust you," she whispered. Kaelen's gaze softened for a brief moment. Trust was rare in his world, almost non-existent. But in her eyes, he saw truth, fear, and survival instincts that mirrored his own. "Good," he said. "But trust alone won't keep you alive. courage, will. And tonight, you'll need both. He moved outside, rain soaking his bare chest, hair plastered to his shoulders. His skin glistened under the storm's sporadic lightning, muscles taut and ready. He checked the perimeters, setting sharp sticks in hidden positions and stringing thin wire alarms across likely paths. Every step was calculated, every shadow a possible threat. Back inside, Mariselle knelt by the fire, listening to the storm, listening to him. The wind rattled the walls, the fire hissed, and somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of hooves and voices cut through the rain. Kaelen returned, face grim, bow in hand. "They're close," he said simply. He handed her a small dagger. "Keep this near. If anyone comes inside, you'll need it. But don't act unless you must." Mariselle nodded again, determination hardening her features. The storm raged on, but inside the cabin, a quiet resolve settled between them. Two strangers, bound by fear and circumstance, prepared to face whatever the desert and Dugan's men would throw at them. Lightning flashed one last time, illuminating Kaelen's taut, vigilant figure outside, the rough walls of the cabin, and Maricelle's determined, trembling face inside. Outside and in, danger approached. And tonight, there would be no turning back. The storm had not relented by dawn. Rain pelted the desert in relentless sheets, turning the dry earth into slippery mud and the jagged rocks into treacherous obstacles. Kaelen crouched outside his cabin, muscles taut and veins pulsing beneath his bronzed skin. His long black hair, plastered by the rain, hung like a dark curtain around his face, tribal jewelry glinting in the sporadic flashes of lightning. He checked the traps once more, making sure every stick wire and hidden alarm was positioned to signal intruders or wound them if necessary. Inside the cabin, Mariselle had pulled the blanket tighter around herself, sitting on the edge of the rough-hewn bed. Her eyes darted to every shadow, every flicker of firelight. She had not spoken much since the night before. Fear had settled over her like a heavy cloak, but beneath it lay the determination that had carried her from Red Willow to Kaelen's cabin. Her hands trembled as she clutched the small dagger he had given her, a tangible reminder that she could fight if the moment demanded. Kaelen's deep voice broke the silence. "They're close," he said, barely audible over the roar of the storm. Mariselle jumped at the sound, but when she saw his calm, measured gaze, she forced herself to steady her breathing. They found me," she whispered, voice cracking. "They know I ran. I saw one of Dugan's men near the town outskirts. They're coming here." Kaelen nodded, already moving toward the cabin's entrance. "Stay low and quiet. If they see me first, they'll think it's only one man and underestimate us." He crouched in the mud outside, every sense alert. Rain mixed with dirt on his bare skin, cold biting into him, but he barely noticed. Survival demanded focus, and his focus was on protecting the woman who had stumbled into his life and onto his land. The wind shifted, carrying faint sounds, hooves, muffled voices, the harsh snap of branches under hurried footsteps. Kaelen's eyes narrowed. Through the veil of rain and darkness, shadowy figures approached, moving with purpose. He flexed his fingers around the bow he held, arrow-notched, ready to strike at the first sign of attack. Inside, Maricelle's heart pounded like a drum. She could see the outlines of his body through the doorway, poised, a figure of raw power and determination. He was unlike anyone she had ever seen. His presence alone seemed to command the desert, the storm, even fate itself. She whispered a silent prayer, gripping the dagger and willing herself to remain still. The first figure stepped into the trap. A wire snapped, tangling the man's leg and sending him crashing into the mud with a guttural curse. Kaelen's eyes gleamed, not with malice, but precision and control. He released the arrow with a fluid motion, the shaft striking another man in the shoulder. He collapsed with a howl, alerting his companions to the threat. Chaos erupted in the storm. Mud flew, shouts echoed, and lightning illuminated the frenzied movement of men trying to navigate traps and rain-soaked terrain. Kaelen moved like a shadow, swift and lethal, his body a perfect combination of strength and skill. Each arrow, each knife, each calculated move brought him closer to securing the perimeter. Mariselle bit her lip, watching in awe and terror. She had never seen violence executed with such precision. Yet amid the chaos, Kaelen's attention occasionally flicked toward her, ensuring she remained safe. That momentary glance, fleeting as it was, made her heart surge with both fear and an unfamiliar trust. The storm reached its peak, wind howling, rain lashing, thunder shaking the rocks. Kaelen had cleared the immediate area of threat, but he knew this was only the beginning. Dugan's men were relentless, and more would come once they realized the first wave had failed. He motioned for Mariselle to follow him to a hidden back passage, a small crawl space carved into the rock behind the cabin. "Quickly," he whispered. "This way. It's safer." Mariselle scrambled after him, slipping in the mud, but he reached out, steadying her with a firm grip. Inside the crawl space, she pressed herself against the cold rock, shivering from both fear and exposure. Kaelen crouched beside her, bow ready, muscles still tense even in the cramped space. "We'll wait for them to make a mistake," he murmured. "Patience will win this night. You've survived storms and men who would see you dead, Mariselle. Trust that. Trust yourself." She swallowed hard, nodding. The storm outside battered the desert, but in the small, dark space, a fragile hope had begun to take root. Survival was no longer just a possibility, it was becoming a plan. And with Kaelen at her side, she dared to believe that they could face whatever the desert, Dugan, and fate had in store. Outside, the shadows shifted in the rain. Somewhere in the darkness, danger lurked, but Kaelen and Mariselle were ready. By the time dawn broke, the storm had eased, leaving the desert slick and glistening, every rock and shrub coated in a thin sheen of water. Kaelen stood outside his cabin, muscles still tense, body slick with rain, scanning the horizon. The first wave of Dugan's men had been repelled, but he knew this was far from over. The Caro gang was relentless. They would regroup faster than most could anticipate. Mariselle emerged from the cabin. Wrapped in a dry blanket Kaelen had laid over a chair by the fire. Her hair was still damp, strands clinging to her dirt-streaked face, but her eyes carried a flicker of determination. She had survived the storm and the initial attack. Now she had to survive the desert that stretched endlessly before them. A harsh and unforgiving expanse where one wrong step could mean death. Kaelen motioned toward the back trail leading into the rocky cliffs. "We can't stay. They'll be back with reinforcements, more men, and they'll track you. If we move fast, we can put distance between us and Red Willow." Mariselle hesitated. "Move where? Into the desert? I barely know how to survive one night out here." Kaelen gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I've survived many nights in this desert. You'll learn fast, or it will teach you the hard way." His eyes softened briefly. "Trust me, Mariselle. I won't let them catch you." With the storm behind them, the air smelled of wet sand and ozone. The cliffs loomed tall and jagged, their edges sharp against the pale morning light. Kaelen led, barefoot, agile, moving over wet rocks with ease, his tribal jewelry and long black hair glinting in the rising sun. Mariselle followed, slipping occasionally but holding on to her courage as he guided her across the rugged terrain. Hours passed, and the Caro gang's pursuit became evident. From the cliffs above, Kaelen spotted distant figures moving through the low mist, the unmistakable shapes of men on horseback. Their presence sharpened his senses. "They're coming," he whispered. "Stay low. Keep behind me." Maricelle's grip tightened on the small dagger he had given her. Her muscles ached, but fear lent her a speed she hadn't known she possessed. Her mind raced with every detail she had seen in Red Willow, the hidden alleys, the saloon, Dugan's sneering face. Every step forward was not just survival, but defiance. Kaelen slowed, pointing to a narrow canyon between two cliffs. "We'll take this. They won't be able to follow closely, and we can ambush if we have to." He crouched, scanning the area, then gestured for her to do the same. They entered the canyon, shadows stretching long under the morning sun. Kaelen moved silently, muscles coiled, every nerve alert. Mariselle followed, her heart hammering in her chest. Then, a sudden shout echoed from the cliff above. The Carroll gang had spotted them. Hooves thundered against the wet rocks, kicking up mud and spraying the canyon floor. Kaelen drew his bow, knocking an arrow in one fluid motion. Mariselle instinctively raised her dagger. The first horseman came too close to a trap Kaelen had set, a hidden wire and stake arrangement. The horse stumbled, throwing its rider into the mud. Another arrow, swift and precise, found the shoulder of a second man. Panic rippled through the remaining pursuers. Mariselle felt her adrenaline surge. "You're amazing," she whispered, ducking behind a boulder as Kaelen loosed another arrow. His control and focus were mesmerizing, muscles taut, eyes sharp, every motion deliberate. Suddenly, Kaelen grabbed her hand. "Come, we move now." He led her through a hidden side path, a narrow ledge along the canyon wall. The descent was treacherous, water-slicked rocks threatening to send them plummeting into the canyon below. Mariselle stumbled, but Kaelen's strong grip steadied her, pulling her close to his chest. For a moment, she felt the raw strength of his body and the quiet protection it offered, and her fear melted into trust. They emerged from the canyon onto a plateau overlooking the desert valley. The Carroll gang had lost their trail, the horses scattered and confused. Kaelen paused, chest heaving, rainwater dripping from his long hair. Mariselle mirrored him, exhausted but alive, the dagger still clutched tightly in her hand. "We've bought time," Kaelen said, eyes scanning the horizon. "But this isn't over. Dugan will keep coming, and we'll need to be ready." Mariselle nodded, determination settling into her features. Fear still lingered, but she had survived the storm, the first attack, and the treacherous canyon. With Kaelen by her side, she believed that survival was no longer impossible, it was becoming a plan. The desert stretched before them, vast and merciless, but Kaelen and Mariselle were alive, and together they would face whatever came next. The desert sun hung low, bleeding gold and red across the horizon, casting long shadows over the rocky plateau. Kaelen and Mariselle had managed to put distance between themselves and the Carroll gang, but neither of them felt safe. Every creak of the rocks, every whisper of wind through the sparse shrubs made Maricelle's heart hammer in her chest. She had learned to move silently, but fear made her hyper-aware, and every shadow seemed like a predator ready to strike. Kaelen's bare feet crunched over loose stones. Muscles coiled, eyes scanning the desert for danger. His long black hair stuck to his rain-slicked skin, and tribal jewelry rattled softly with every step. He hadn't spoken much. Words were unnecessary. Actions mattered more here. Survival depended on vigilance, on timing, on anticipating the enemy before they moved. Suddenly, Mariselle froze. "Kaelen, someone's there," she whispered, pointing toward a narrow canyon mouth behind them. Kaelen's eyes narrowed. From the distance, he could just make out a lone figure, another woman, dressed in rough travel clothes, standing still as the sun cast her in silhouette. Relief and confusion collided in Maricelle's chest. "Maybe someone helping us?" she asked. Kaelen didn't answer. His instinct screamed caution. "Stay behind me," he murmured, crouching low. Every fiber of his being was alert. He didn't trust strangers, especially not in the desert, where one wrong move could mean death. The woman stepped forward slowly, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Please, I mean no harm," she said. Her voice was calm but strained, carrying a subtle undertone of urgency. "I know a place you can hide. The gang won't find you there." Kaelen studied her carefully. The words were plausible, but something in the woman's stance, the way she shifted her weight, made him hesitate. He gestured for Mariselle to stay close. "Talk fast." "What is this place?" "A canyon deep in the western cliffs," the woman explained, glancing nervously behind her. "It's narrow, almost hidden, and there's a stream for water. No one will find you, if you trust me." Kaelen's eyes flickered to the canyon, assessing the distance, the approach, the risks. He could use the terrain to his advantage, but instinct screamed caution. He motioned for Mariselle to follow as they approached the stranger. Every step was deliberate, measured. As they neared, the stranger suddenly lunged, a knife glinting in her hand. Mariselle gasped, stumbling back, but Kaelen was faster. With a swift, fluid motion, he grabbed the woman's wrist, twisting it and sending the knife clattering into the rocks. His muscles rippled with control and strength, eyes sharp with alert intensity. "Betrayal doesn't announce itself," he said quietly, his voice low, dangerous. "Who sent you?" The woman hissed, struggling against his grip. "Dugan." "I'm sorry. I had no choice." Maricelle's eyes widened, heart pounding. They tricked us," she whispered. "They're everywhere." Kaelen's jaw tightened. The Caro gang was cunning, and Dugan was ruthless. He had counted on their pursuit being straightforward, but deception had been their weapon. "Get ready," he said, glancing at Mariselle. "This isn't over." Not by a long shot. He released the woman and pushed her forward with a warning. She scuttled back into the shadows, terrified but alive. Kaelen motioned for Mariselle to follow him as he led her along a hidden trail through the plateau's jagged rocks. Every step was deliberate, every sense heightened. He knew they had to move fast. Reinforcements from Dugan could arrive at any moment. The sun dipped lower, setting the desert ablaze with reds and purples, shadows stretching long across the terrain. Kaelen paused on a ridge, scanning the horizon. The Caro gang's campfires were visible now, small pinpricks of light in the growing darkness. They had been followed despite the canyon ambush, despite the storm. Dugan was relentless. Mariselle, shivering from exhaustion and tension, whispered, "Kaelen, we can't outrun them forever." Kaelen's gaze softened briefly as he looked at her, then hardened again. "No," he said. "But we don't have to outrun them. We just have to survive tonight." He took her hand, leading her down into a narrow, hidden ravine where the shadows of the cliffs provided cover. They moved like ghosts, silent and unseen, hearts pounding. Aware that the desert was beautiful but deadly, and that Dugan would stop at nothing to claim what he wanted. As darkness swallowed the desert, Kaelen and Mariselle pressed on. Two figures against the sprawling, merciless wilderness. They were hunted, betrayed, and tested, but together they still had a chance to survive. The desert night was silent, almost unnervingly so. Stars glittered faintly above, their light muted by the lingering dust from the day's storm. Kaelen crouched behind a ridge, muscles coiled, body taut and alert. His long black hair hung in wet strands over his face, tribal jewelry clinking softly with every subtle movement. Beside him, Mariselle pressed herself against the rocky ground, her blanket discarded, dagger in hand, eyes wide but determined. "They're close," Kaelen whispered, scanning the terrain. He could hear the faint rustle of boots in the sand, the soft shuffle of horses' hooves. Dugan's men had regrouped, and they were smarter this time, spreading out to flank the ridge. Kaelen's jaw tightened. Every instinct in his body screamed that the next minutes would decide whether they survived the night. Mariselle swallowed hard, shivering not from cold but from anticipation. How can we fight them all?" she whispered. Fear was still there, but beneath it, a flicker of courage had begun to burn. Kaelen's eyes softened briefly. "We don't fight them all," he said. "We fight smart. We make them think they're in control, then we turn the desert into their trap." Lightning flashed, though distant, briefly illuminating the jagged desert cliffs and casting long shadows across the sand. Kaelen shifted, motioning Mariselle to follow him to a narrow pass where rocks jutted out like natural barricades. "Stay low. Keep behind me," he instructed. His voice was calm, a sharp contrast to the pounding of his heart and the tension in the air. The first figure appeared, moving cautiously through the pass. Kaelen drew his bow with fluid motion, arrow notched. In one precise shot, he struck the lead pursuer in the shoulder. The man fell with a grunt, his companion startled. Another arrow found a second target, and a third was immobilized by a hidden pit trap Kaelen had prepared earlier. Maricelle's eyes widened. She could barely believe what she was seeing. His speed, strength, and accuracy were almost otherworldly. She gripped her dagger tighter, ready to defend herself, but Kaelen's presence made her feel shielded, as if nothing could harm her while he was near. Then a shout came from the shadows. Dugan himself emerged, mounted on a black stallion, face twisted with rage. "Kaelen, you'll regret helping her." Dugan's voice boomed, carrying across the desert, echoing against the cliffs. His men surged forward, regrouping for a final attack. Kaelen's eyes narrowed. "Stay behind me," he said to Mariselle, positioning her behind a large boulder. Every muscle in his body tensed, ready for the confrontation. The desert was his battlefield, and he knew every stone, every shadow, every advantage it could offer. Dugan's men approached, overconfident, their horses slipping in the loose sand. Kaelen released another arrow, striking one man's horse, sending him tumbling into the dust. Chaos erupted. Mariselle ducked instinctively, heart pounding. Kaelen moved like a shadow, arrows flying, body low and lethal. When one man tried to rush him, he sidestepped and drove the butt of his bow into the man's chest, sending him sprawling. Rain from the storm earlier still dampened the ground, making every step treacherous. But Kaelen navigated it with precision born of years in the wilderness. Mariselle, inspired by his skill, moved closer, dagger ready, and helped Kaelen disable a pursuer who had slipped past him. Her courage surprised her, but it was real, growing with every heartbeat. Finally, only Dugan remained, horse-rearing as Kaelen faced him in the narrow canyon pass. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the desert like a spotlight. Kaelen's dark eyes met Dugan's furious glare. The warrior drew his knife, muscles flexing, every inch of his body radiating lethal control. "You'll never harm her again," Kaelen said quietly, voice calm but deadly. Dugan snarled, lunging forward, but Kaelen sidestepped, using his strength and agility to knock the gun from Dugan's hand. The black stallion bolted in panic, leaving its rider exposed. Kaelen's knife pressed against Dugan's chest, stopping him cold. The desert was silent again, only the wind whispering through the rocks. Mariselle stepped forward, still trembling but no longer paralyzed by fear. Dugan's men lay defeated or fled into the desert. Kaelen released the knife but didn't relax. "Leave this place and never return," he commanded. Dugan glared, rage burning in his eyes, but he knew defeat. With a snarl, he turned and vanished into the desert night. Mariselle exhaled shakily, wrapping herself in the blanket again. I thought we were done for," she whispered. Kaelen's expression softened, just slightly. "The desert teaches patience and courage," he said. "You've survived storms, betrayal, and men who would see you dead. That counts for something." For the first time since the nightmare began, Mariselle allowed herself to believe that they had survived, that the desert, for now, was theirs. And with Kaelen by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. The desert night gave way to a pale, trembling dawn. The wind had calmed, leaving only the soft whistle of early morning through the cliffs. Kaelen crouched on a rocky outcrop, muscles taut even in stillness, his long black hair plastered with sweat and remnants of rain. Tribal jewelry shimmered faintly in the first rays of sunlight, and his dark eyes scanned the horizon. The remnants of Dugan's gang had scattered, and the desert lay quiet, too quiet, Kaelen thought. Always alert for hidden dangers, Mariselle emerged from the shadow of a boulder, blanket draped loosely over her shoulders, dagger still in hand. Her body ached, exhaustion etched in every line, but her spirit was stronger than ever. She had faced storms, betrayal, and armed men intent on her death, and she was alive. The realization brought a flicker of hope she hadn't felt since Red Willow. Kaelen's voice broke the silence, low and steady. "We've survived the night, but the desert is still dangerous. We need a place to rest and plan our next move." Mariselle nodded, following him as he led the way through a narrow ravine. The rocks and shadows provided cover, but every step demanded vigilance. She had learned quickly how to move quietly, how to anticipate danger, and how to trust Kaelen's instincts honed from years of living in the unforgiving wilderness. Hours passed. They navigated through hidden canyons and over jagged ridges, moving like ghosts through the vast desert. Each time Mariselle faltered, Kaelen's hand steadied her. Each time doubt crept in, his unwavering presence reassured her. By late morning, they came upon a small plateau, partially shielded by rock formations and a sparse grove of twisted desert trees. It was a safe haven, at least temporarily, a place to breathe and regroup. Kaelen dropped to the ground, muscles relaxing slightly, bow resting across his knees. Mariselle sank beside him, pulling the blanket tighter around her. The desert stretched endlessly before them, harsh and beautiful, a wilderness of survival and freedom. "You've done well," Kaelen said quietly, glancing at her. "Tonight, you survived fear, betrayal, and violence. You fought, and you didn't falter." Mariselle looked at him, her chest rising and falling with deep, uneven breaths. I never thought I'd make it this far. You saved me more than once." Her voice wavered, but gratitude and something fragile and new shone in her eyes. Kaelen's expression softened. "You helped yourself. I only guided you. Courage is not just physical, it's in the heart. You've proven yours tonight." A moment of silence fell between them, filled with the subtle sounds of the desert, distant crows cawing, wind brushing over rocks, and the faint ripple of a hidden stream nearby. For the first time in days, Mariselle allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel the weight of survival and the promise of a new beginning. Kaelen stood, stretching long limbs, and scanned the horizon again. "Dugan won't give up easily," he said, voice low but steady. "He'll regroup and try again. But for now, we have time. Time to rest, heal, and plan. And perhaps, time to figure out what comes next." Mariselle rose, determination shining in her eyes. "I want to stay with you," she said quietly. "I can't go back to the town, not after everything, and I don't want to be alone anymore." Kaelen studied her long and carefully. The desert had taught him caution, patience, and the value of trust. He saw her courage, her resilience, and the bond forged through fear and survival. Finally, he nodded. "Then we'll stay for now. The desert is vast, but we'll face it together. The sun climbed higher, casting warm light across the cliffs and plateau. Kaelen and Mariselle sat together, weary but alive, surrounded by the endless desert that had tested them, threatened them, and ultimately brought them together. The distant echo of Dugan's defeat faded into the horizon. For the first time in a long while, Mariselle allowed herself to smile. The night of terror was over, and the dawn of freedom had arrived. Kaelen's eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. "Whatever comes next," he said softly, "we face it together. The desert won't break us." Mariselle nodded, heart steady, courage renewed. Side by side, they gazed out over the rugged, untamed landscape, a future uncertain, yet full of possibility. They had survived storms, betrayal, and ruthless men. Now they were free. And in the vast, wild desert, freedom was everything.